All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a genuinely fascinating dynamic. Why is it that bad faith actors always seem to, well, expose themselves? We're going to systematically break down a really profound theological and psychological analysis by Dr. Othman Jealan. He digs deep into the mechanics of deceit, the whole structure of hypocrisy, and how these corrupt systems inevitably collapse under something he calls the divine law of exposure. It's honestly a brilliant look at how ancient texts map absolutely perfectly onto modern human behavior. Because, let's face it, while our technology changes, human nature, yeah, that doesn't change a bit.
Our entire foundation for this analysis rests right here on a specific verse from the Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, verse 61. It reads, "And among them are those who abuse the prophet and say, 'He is an ear.' Say, 'It is an ear of goodness for you.'" Now, Dr. Jealan doesn't just treat this as some static historical footnote. Not at all. He takes this exact interaction and uses it as a key to unlock a universal human behavior. It acts as the anchor for a much larger sociological theory about how deceitful networks operate, and crucially, for any of us dealing with toxic environments today, how those networks are eventually exposed. And that brings us right to the core concept of this whole explainer. Dr. Jealan defines the divine law of exposure as the inevitable, divinely orchestrated unmasking of those who secretly plot against reformers. It's the active stripping away of their hidden agendas. I really want to emphasize those two words, inevitable and divinely orchestrated, because the crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just viewed as some relic of the past. It is an active, absolute, and systemic law that's operating in the background of our society right now, whether people actually realize it or not. So here's our roadmap for today. First, Surah At-Tawbah and exposure. Second, the illusion of stupidity and concealment. Third, the hypocrisy system and spying tools. Fourth, divine justice in reality. And finally, a reassuring message to reformers. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Surah At-Tawbah and exposure. To really grasp the mechanics of this law, we first need to understand the exact insult that was being thrown around. When the hypocrites called the prophet an ear, what were they actually saying? Well, they falsely believed he was incredibly gullible. They genuinely thought he was just a passive, listening ear who would believe whatever nonsense they fed him. So, operating under this massive delusion, they assumed they were intellectually superior. They mocked him behind his back, figuring they could flawlessly deceive him with empty words and fake loyalty. But here's the catch. The reality was the exact opposite of what they thought. The text points out that the prophet actually possessed immense divine insight. He understood their lies perfectly. He had the intuition to see right through their plotting. Yet, and this is the key, he actively chose restraint and patience. He treated them based entirely on their outward public actions, purposefully leaving their hidden secrets to God. He wasn't being fooled at all. He was actually delivering a masterclass in extreme strategic self-control. Section 2. Illusion of stupidity and concealment. This whole dynamic brilliantly highlights a really profound psychological clash. On one side, you have the hypocrite falling straight into the trap of cognitive arrogance. You see, when the reformer doesn't immediately strike back or expose them or react to their gossip, the hypocrite naturally just assumes it's because the reformer is weak, naive, or maybe just plain stupid. But on the other side, the reality is the reformer is utilizing a highly intentional policy of concealment. It is a strategic silence. And according to Dr. Jealan, this silence serves a much higher purpose. It actually gives those bad actors a generous window of time to reflect and repent before their own arrogance inevitably forces them to unmask themselves. So we can see that the reformer's silence isn't an ear of gullibility at all. Like the verse explicitly says, it's an ear of goodness. Dr. Jealan explains that this kind of ear actively refuses to descend into the toxic swamps of gossip and malice. And pausing to recognize that distinction is absolutely critical. I mean, it takes tremendous energy to stay out of that swamp, right? It's a deliberate, highly disciplined choice to elevate yourself far above the bad faith tactics being constantly thrown your way.
Section 3. Hypocrisy system and spying tools.
Here, the author really successfully bridges this historical text directly into modern society, showing us an unbroken chain of human behavior. Historically, you had specific guys like Nabtal bin al-Harith acting as eyes and ears, secretly carrying the prophet's news back to the opposition leaders. Today, well, the tech has changed, but the roles are exactly the same. Dr. Jealan likens this to modern-day surveillance tools, covert informants, and the folks writing intelligence reports for various agencies. They are constantly tracking reformers, operating under this wild delusion that their secret work keeps them completely insulated from any consequences.
And look at how this fragile systemic alliance is actually structured. Hypocrisy isn't just a one-off individual behavior. It is an entire ecosystem. Right at the top, you've got the powerful elites. Their main motivation is maintaining control over the narrative, sure, but their glaring vulnerability? A deep, paralyzing fear of public scandal. Then, down at the base, you have your marginalized opportunists. They are doing the dirty work out of a desperate need for favor or just simple survival. But their ultimate vulnerability is that they're entirely disposable to the people above them. Honestly, the only things binding this whole system together are dirty utility and a shared underlying terror of being exposed.
Section 4. Divine Justice in Reality. So how exactly does this whole fragile ecosystem come crashing down? Well, the source lays out the mechanics of this divine justice pretty clearly. First, and ironically, hostility actually accelerates the unmasking. The harder and more aggressively they try to destroy a reformer, the faster their own erratic actions accidentally tear off their masks. Second, there's a layer of divine protection actively guarding the reformer's ultimate reputation. Third, this law of exposure is absolute. It plays zero favorites, completely ignoring whatever earthly power or wealth someone thinks they possess. And finally, here's a truly striking point. The perpetrators are ultimately punished using the exact same deceptive methods they weaponized against others. Talk about poetic justice. The source establishes this very clear-cut rule of cause and effect, bringing that core concept of the ear full circle in a way that applies to literally all of us. If an ear is constantly tuned for evil, gossip, and malice, the law dictates a terrifying result, the divine exposure of that person's own deepest secrets. But on the flip side, if an ear is tuned for good, deliberately practicing that policy of concealment and patience we talked about, God elevates their status. It ensures they are remembered positively, long after the noise of all that gossip fades away. Now, looking at all this mounting evidence and historical precedent, a really natural question pops up. Why doesn't the hypocrite see this coming? I mean, if these laws are so absolute and inevitable, why don't they just believe in them, recognize their own impending ruin, and learn from it before it is way too late? Dr. Jealan answers this incredibly methodically. God doesn't force their guidance. Instead, several converging factors trap them in a loop of their own making. There's a demonic influence pushing them forward, paired with an overwhelming human stubbornness and a blinding self-interest that totally distorts their reality. But perhaps the most fascinating and frankly terrifying concept here is the theological idea of istidraj, or divine staging. This basically means they are actually allowed to succeed temporarily. They're handed enough rope to go further astray, feeling super victorious in the short term, which really just guarantees that their ultimate exposure and downfall is going to be that much more devastating and complete.
Section 5, a reassuring message to reformers. After mapping out all those dark mechanics of deceit, the author beautifully pivots. He highlights how God steps in directly to defend the prophet. When the opposition mocked him as merely being an ear, the divine response completely reframed it, an ear of goodness for you. It proves that the very person they were mocking, plotting against, and trying to absolutely destroy was actually a profound source of mercy for them all along. For anyone practicing restraint today, this is huge. It proves that enduring mockery can actually serve as a massive, powerful divine shield. And there's this brilliant linguistic observation the author makes about the end of that verse. The text mentions a painful punishment for those who abuse the prophet, but it notably does not specify that this punishment is reserved only for the hereafter. Dr. Jealan argues this omission is highly deliberate. It indicates that the very act of fighting reformers inherently brings worldly suffering right back onto the hypocrites themselves. It strikes them in the present world, destroying their peace of mind and their standing in society way before any afterlife. They literally engineer their own real-world ruin. Which leaves us with this really powerful concluding reflection from Surah Al-Munafiqun. But the hypocrites do not know. The source really hammers home their profound lack of true understanding. They don't know where their actual interests lie, and they just do not grasp the inevitable consequences of their own toxic actions. So it leaves us to ponder. In a world that feels increasingly obsessed with exposure and tearing others down, are the most malicious actors currently orchestrating their own unmasking without even realizing it? Think about that the next time you witness bad faith attacks. Until next time, keep questioning.